first word of William Blake's poem, Visions of the Daughters of Albion, is enslaved. Most obviously, the poem is about Oothoon, the female character in the poem, being enslaved by Bromian. Bromian stands for the British imperialist who is in control of America. Oothoon, in this regard, stands for America. Between Oothoon and Bromian would be Theotormon, the lover of Oothoon. So we have this setup that Bromian is the imperialist, we could even say colonialist, who enslaves those that people the lands that he wants violently to control. But it turns out that Bromian and Theotormon are enslaved as well. In further lectures, I'll go into that, but they are enslaved by their own egos in quite different ways. In this particular lecture, I want to focus on Oothoon, however. So Oothoon is in direct contrast to Thel. We saw how Thel, at the end of the poem, the Book of Thel, seemed to fear sexuality and ran back shrieking into the vales of horror. In other words, sexual experience was something that terrified her, and she was not ready for it. In Blake's world, this isn't necessarily a good thing. As I mentioned in my lecture on the Book of Thel, Blake believes that if you stay in the realm of innocence too long, it becomes a kind of hell. Well, Oothoon, in contrast to Thel, becomes sexually awakened and celebrates her sexuality. She plucks a marigold and places it between her breasts, and that signifies her sexual readiness. So she is someone who embraces the world of generation. However, the minute she expresses her sexual readiness, she is violently raped by Bromian, who in sort of classical misogynistic fashion says, well, you asked for it. Because you showed me your sexuality, that means you wanted me to have sex with you. Of course, that's a horrendous justification of a horrific deed, but that's what he says. And then he goes on to say, you are my slave now. I've branded you, as the slaves from Africa would have been branded in the British slave trade as well as the American slave trade. So that's the one big act in the poem, Bromian raping Oothoon, and it happens very, very quickly. And the rest of the poem is composed of the three main characters interpreting this act in different ways. And the primary interpretation of Oothoon is that even though Bromian raped my body, I am not impure, I am not defiled, I am still pure, I am still myself. And she says this over and over again to Theotormon, who basically thinks that Oothoon now is sort of wasted goods. He's not interested in her now because she's been defiled by Bromian. Now, part of Oothoon saying over and over again, I am pure, is her embrace of particularity. She's very interested in the sensual world. She's very interested in distinctions between different animals, between different kinds of people. You get a sense from her that she embraces what is most immediate to the senses. And if she herself feels as if she has not been defiled, that is immediate to her inner life, to her senses, then that is indeed the case. So while we have Bromian constantly invoking theories to justify his behavior, and while we have Theotormon constantly going deeper and deeper inside into his melancholy, his despair over his betrothed having been raped, we see Oothoon saying things like this. She says, hey Theotormon, don't lament what's happened to me. The village dog barks at the breaking day. The nightingale has done lamenting. The lark does rustle in the ripe corn. The eagle returns from nightly prey and lifts his golden beak to the pure east, shaking the dust from his immortal pinions to awake the sun that sleeps too long. So there's a sense here that, look at the natural world. The lark rises up every morning. The eagle flies beautifully. There's a loveliness to this world that has nothing to do with moral code, of human moral code, in this case, a misogynistic moral code. So why can't Thea Tormund see Oothoon as this beautiful, natural woman who rises from the morning just like the lark? Furthermore, Oothoon draws distinctions among the different kinds of living creatures that she celebrates. With what sense is it that the chicken shuns the ravenous hawk? With what sense does the tame pigeon measure out the expanse? With what sense does the bee form cells? Have not the mouse and frog eyes and ears and sense of touch? Yet their habitations and their pursuits are as different as their forms and their joys. So this embrace of particularity is especially important to Blake. We know how he pushes against the ratio, especially in his earlier pieces, There Is No Natural Religion and All Religions Are One. So we see someone like Oothoon in embracing particularity, embraces sexuality, embraces her individuality, and therefore is extremely skeptical of any kind of totalizing moral code that tries to reduce everyone's difference to the same. And she really brings this idea to a powerful conclusion near the end of the poem, where she actually celebrates sexuality. This would have been rare in Blake's time, especially for a woman to do this. She says, the moment of desire, the virgin that pines for man shall awaken her womb to enormous joys in the secret shadows of her chamber. The youth shut up from, the lustful joys shall forget to generate and create an amorous image in the shadows of his curtains and in the folds of his silent pillow. Are not these the places of religion, the rewards of continence, the self-enjoyings of self-denial? Why dost thou seek religion? Is it because acts are not lovely that thou seekest solitude, where the horrible darkness is impressed with reflections of desire? Acts are lovely, lovely in this world. So sex is just as important as the lark rising at morning, just as important as the poet writing poetry, just as important as the good person being benevolent and merciful toward another. So we see here with Oothoon Blake's celebration at a very early time in Western history of what we might call free love. Love that has nothing to do with marriage, love that has nothing to do with morality. So Oothoon in this regard is a kind of proto-feminist hero, not only speaking on behalf of a woman's right to her own body, not only speaking on behalf of a woman's right to enjoy sexuality, but also appearing in this poem, at least, as a kind of mouthpiece for Blake's most powerful ideas of how artists see the world and how artists express the world.